welcome to Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Classen, joined once again by our Husker insider, Jake Bartecki. Jake, we got to feel pretty good. Huskers with a big win. They defend home. It didn't always look pretty, but they came back, showed some resiliency, I thought, and beat old Sparty.
What a roller coaster of a game. I mean, Nebraska goes up 14-0. You see 21 unanswered from Michigan State and then 24 unanswered from Nebraska. Look, I've said this a couple times already this week to people just asking what I thought of the game. I think that's a game Nebraska probably loses in recent years. I feel like they probably would have gotten down on themselves when they went down a touchdown. But they bounced right back. Credit to them. They did a nice job and got a win by 2 scores, evidently.
I was going to say, I think everybody would have taken a 38-27 victory over Michigan State. You know, the offense showed us some good things, averaged 4.7 yards per play, did have their lapses. What are your overall concerns moving forward? Because we're looking at a pretty good Maryland team coming up here.
Well, I think there's concern for the run game and trying to get that going, but I think a lot of that is because on second and third down, Nebraska's playing behind the sticks. Yeah. And why have they been playing behind the sticks? 12 sacks in the last 2 games allowed by the Huskers. And notice how I said by the Huskers, not by the offensive line. I think the offensive line was more to blame against Michigan than they were against Michigan State. If you actually look at some of the PFF grades for the Huskers offensive line against Michigan State, they were really high. So I think some of that comes down to the running backs blocking. I think some of it comes down to the wide receiver struggling to get open. And as we've talked about at length multiple times, sometimes Dylan Raiola hangs on the ball a little too long. He doesn't like throwing interceptions, which is great. But at the same time, you got to think about throwing the ball away.
Well, let's kind of dive into that because you're kind of taking me where I want to go. Let's talk about some of the positives we saw from the offense. I mean, they did score 38 points. We saw a lot of accountability from Dylan Raiola. A couple of times he said, hey, that sack was on me.
Right.
And we didn't hear too much mudslinging on the offensive line. In fact, we heard coaches, players, tight ends, running backs, all kind of go to bat for them throughout the week.
Yeah, positives for me were the wide receivers. I think Ceyair Hunter had his best game of the day, or game of the season, excuse me. And I think at the same time, Dane Key also had a really good day. I mean, Dana Holgorsen said this week during media availability that he thought it was his best game. Look, he didn't show up on the stat sheet, but he blocked really well. That touchdown in the third quarter, he kind of sprung Emmett Johnson out of the backfield with a key block there. So Dane Key and Ceyair Hunter, there's a big difference in what you're seeing from them than the wide receivers Nebraska had last year. And I think a lot of that comes down to perimeter blocking. I thought Dylan Raiola did make some decent throws. Obviously, the interception wasn't great. Yeah. But at the same time, I thought he made the right reads. He made the routine plays. And he didn't force anything except for that one interception. So that's good. Of course, not forcing anything also leads you to not wanting to throw the ball away a little bit, which I think they need to do. Yeah. But look, overall, Nebraska scored 38 points. They looked explosive at times. I think wish could have taken advantage of some of that field position set up by the defense and the special teams. But going back to it, they won by 2 scores, and they win at 38-27.
Yeah, and they did bounce back. They had 4 scoring drives in a row starting late in the third quarter and into the fourth that kind of, gave them that space, that breathing room. You mentioned the OC, Dana Holgorsen. Let's hear from him and head coach right now.
Everything. That one time as I pointed the finger at the O-line, it's everything. It's the entire offense. One of the sacks, it was a bad play call. Now we just got kind of beat, right? But I can prevent that in that setting. When Dylan got beat after, we would have scored, and we went backwards. Okay, it was a bad play, bad loss, I shouldn't have called the play I did, which forced 5-man protection. Tackle gets beat, and there's another negative play. So just compounding plays. That's on me. The running back, there's one on him. The receiver's got to continue to get open quickly, and then, Dylan. There a couple, one. I know at least one of them was on Dylan. We had a wide open end cut, and he didn't trigger it. Just got to be in the proper headspace and get rid of the ball.
A lot of good things, and I saw some other things, that have to be improved. Some of the sacks are, on them. Some of the sacks are on other people. But right now, Emmett Johnson is 3rd in the league in rushing. Right, so the narrative that's out there that we can't run the football is kind of silly, right? We're just, college football, you take away sacks. Are we giving up too many sacks? Yes. I mean, one of them, that's what I love about Dylan Raiola. He stands up on the one. I don't know if you guys, he went, that's on me. He was holding the ball, right?
Okay, so like I was mentioning earlier, they're going to bat for, the offense as a whole. They're not just pointing the finger at the offensive line. I love to hear that. And I felt they were very transparent, honest. Like, look, we have some work to do.
There's reasons for everything, and those reasons have reasons too. So the offensive line, sure, you got 12 sacks allowed in the last 2 weeks, but again, you look at the Pro Football Focus rankings; those guys aren't dummies. They know what they know what they're doing. I do think there is a little bit of hesitation from Dylan Raiola to throw the ball away, and I think at times he moves around in the pocket a little bit, which opens up other rushing lanes for the defense. In terms of rushing the quarterback. So when you move around a lot like Dylan does, it makes it a little easier for the defenders to get into the backfield and get after him. But again, there's a lot of people that don't like that say that he needs to take off and run. Sure, if he sees open grass ahead of him and he wants to move around a little bit and take advantage of it, go for it. But at the same time, you also don't want him to get hurt. And I think that's probably what his concern is with running, is he doesn't want to get hurt. Now Nebraska's got a decent backup at quarterback if that was the case, but Dylan Raiola is who the offense has been built around. It's who you recruited around to get guys like Hunter and Dane Key. You need him out there.
Another quarterback that he reminds me of, big frame guy, maybe held onto the ball a little too long, had a really good career in the NFL, Ben Roethlisberger.
That's a comparison, yeah.
I mean, and he always said, hey, a lot of those sacks are on me. I'm trying to extend plays. I'm trying to look up receivers down the field. The demeanor, how he tries to manipulate the pocket, I see a lot of that in Raiola.
I see where you're going with that a little bit. I mean, different style quarterback in the respect that I think Ben Roethlisberger had different weapons than kind of what Raiola has. I think there were deep threats that Ben Roethlisberger had, and that's probably why he wanted to extend those plays a little bit more. But at the same time, you're right. I mean, I think the respect that Dylan Raiola has made it clear he doesn't like turning the ball over, that's a good thing. And Matt Rhule has mentioned this week. He's okay with a third down sack. It's the first down sack that hurts things because then you're starting behind the chains.
Right.
So for me, I think if Dylan Raiola really is in a situation where he's trying to get the ball downfield, the route running isn't working, and he's under pressure, throw the ball away. There's no harm in it, especially on first down.
Well, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the defense. A word that I'm hearing a lot of and I agree with is complementary. Our defensive line is, maybe stepping it up and complementing the defensive backs. The defensive backs and their coverage are helping out the D-line. Let's take a minute to listen to some words that Ceyair Wright had to say coming away from that Michigan State victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's just every week just being intentional about development. I think we're a very tight-knit group. We always make sure to get extra work in whenever we can, go over film, concepts, just stuff like that. So, it's just about, every week just trying to get better.
Okay, very even keel, matter of fact, to the point. And I don't care if it's a D lineman, a rush end, a defensive back, or a linebacker. I like that demeanor from my defensive players.
And he's referring to that secondary being the number one pass defense in the nation. I mean, less than 92 passing yards allowed per game by Nebraska. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to guys like Andrew Marshall. I mean, this is a guy that came in from the FCS and is now all of a sudden one of the shutdown corners that Nebraska has. At the same time, they've been doing this without Malcolm Hartzog, too. He got hurt, a couple games ago. He missed his third game in a row. He's still questionable for the matchup against Maryland, but this group puts in a lot of work together. They were talking about this week. They go into the stadium after hours in the dark. They go out and play. I think there's a lot of hard work put in there. I think the players deserve a lot of credit for that. And so do the guys a little bit deeper. I mean, Rex Guthrie and Deshaun Singleton, who was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, had an awesome game, had that scoop and score call back as well. This is a group that is playing really well right now in the secondary. And I think up front, they were better against Michigan State. Right. And this is an offensive line that's not overwhelming. I tell you one guy on that front seven that has impressed the heck out of me lately is Williams Nwaneri. The guy gets after the quarterback. And again, we talked about Dane Key not necessarily showing up on the stat sheet as a wide receiver, though he might have had his best game. You can kind of say the same about Williams Nwaneri on the defensive side because he blew up plays. I mean, he got Childs uncomfortable. He talked about it. He knew that he was able to get Childs uncomfortable. Obviously, there were still some run plays by Childs that were a little disappointing, but guys like Williams Nwaneri, they've stepped up in a big way. I mean, Jamari Butler left. Williams Nwaneri comes in from Mizzou and takes that role really well.
Yeah, and that speaks to that complementary football, right? Even if he doesn't come up with the splash sack or the fun stat, he's still forcing the issue, getting the quarterback off of his spot, allowing for a defensive back to make a play. You touched on the depth there, where we're seeing guys like Dawson, Merritt, and Guthrie really take on bigger roles. Is that turning into something more than a trend?
I don't know, because Marquise Watson-Trent was the starter for that linebacker spot, and that's where Dawson Merritt got in. So it could be. It really could. Nobody really asked this week about Dawson Merritt and Rex Guthrie getting out there and playing as much as they have. I mean, I know Jonathan Butler brought up Rex Guthrie and said he's played really well over this past couple of weeks, and I think he has in the place of Malcolm Hartzog, and Donovan Jones has been out there as well. Dawson Merritt surprised me. I mean, he had a pretty significant shoulder injury. Just to be a freshman linebacker in the Big Ten, I actually like that call because I think the linebacking core is one that has a mix of veteran and youth, and I think that could be really good for Dawson Merritt to get that playing time early in his career.
Yeah, I love it when we can kind of flex some depth, get new guys in there, and they perform well. Somebody that's been performing very well is every single guy on the special teams, whether it's punt return, kickoff return, punt cover. Coach Eckler really has those boys going. You know, I remember when we went to Arrowhead together, and you asked Coach Eckler, how are you feeling? And he goes, fantastic. I think he says that to everybody. I just saw a deal where someone asked, how are you doing good? He goes, no, I'm doing great. And that's just the type of person he is. And you can see that translating to the play on the field and throughout the players, where they're not just playing good, they're playing great. It looks like they're feeling great.
Yeah, Coach Eckler, I think he carries a lot of joy and energy everywhere he goes, just for the game of football and for his entire special teams unit. I think the one part of special teams that struggled a little bit was Archie Wilson had a couple of punts that I think the wind probably confused him, but I don't know, he probably wasn't used to seeing that in Australia, but we're nitpicking there because Kyle Cunanan has been clean since the miss at Michigan, and on top of that, Ja'Cory Barney has a big punt return. He has one call back. Carter Nelson picks up the block punt. Incredible play by Jameer Khan, by the way. I mean, you talk about Nebraska reading what Michigan State set up there perfectly. There was nobody able to block Jameer Khan because Nebraska took that defender that Michigan State had 2-on-1 in. Absolutely exceptionally drawn up punt block. So the special teams, which was a problem for so many years for Nebraska, is finally something that they can rely on, I think. And it flipped the field, especially when the offense was put in situations in that second quarter when they were not able to move the ball, penalties, sacks, backed them up. The special teams getting them the field position that they did, and same with the defense, probably kept Michigan State points off the board.
Yeah, and what a huge shift there, where it's not a liability anymore. It's actually a positive. It's contributing to winning football games on the special teams unit. You mentioned Nwaneri. He had some thoughts. He took the podium speaking on the freshman quarterback, Mr. Washington, there in Maryland. You look at him and you think, okay, he's only 18 or 19 years old. Don't get caught up in that. This guy is very talented. Let's hear what our rush end has to say.
He seemed like pretty athletic quarterback, you know. Like you said, bigger body. But I say we kind of a little bit similar, you know, athletic dude. So we want to just really take almost not the same approach, but we want to get to him early and affect them, you know, and just make it easier on us, make it easier on the back end.
Okay, he's taken this talent very seriously. I think we should. It's amazing the talent level across the Big Ten at the quarterback position. Yeah. And this Maryland team is sneaky, really good. You know, they've always fly under the radar, but man, they got weapons at wide receiver. They got a very talented quarterback that's maybe punching up a weight class here.
Yeah, 3 wide receivers with over 17 yards per reception. So this team really lives on the big play. And what's been the big problem for Nebraska, Andy, when it comes to quarterbacks this season?
If they can move the pocket.
That's the one thing Malik Washington doesn't have a lot of. Just 22 yards rushing this season for Malik Washington. So what Nebraska is good at is countered by what Maryland is good at. And you can look at that 2 different ways. You can say, well, Maryland's got the upper hand because they've got the big play, but Nebraska's also got the #1 pass defense in the nation. So take whatever side you want there, but I actually think this is a decent matchup for Nebraska, Maryland offense to the black shirts. Where this gets tricky is this group has 19 sacks, #1 pass rush, so that is a little bit of a concern for me. I think it makes it ultra important for the offensive line to play well and for Dylan Raiola to recognize when he needs to throw the ball away, because these guys are going to bring some heat.
And it's something that fans and even us media types like to do. We talk offense, and when you're talking Maryland, they've put so many wide receivers into the league over the past 4, 5, 6 years. But doing some homework here before we went on air, I was looking at some defensive statistics. Maryland has a top 10 scoring defense, holding their opposition to under 11 points per game. So it is going to be strength on strength when you talk about our defensive backs versus their wide receivers. But it's also going to be, okay, if we have this high-flying offense, they got the number 7 scoring defense in the nation. So that's going to be a matchup to watch as well.
Absolutely. It's going to make winning the turnover battle and not turning the ball over, offense to defense, really important this weekend. Obviously, we'll get into the keys, but I think that's one you could throw in every single week, but I think it's important this weekend, too, is taking care of the football.
Well, it's that time of the broadcast, the show here. Let's get into those Jake Bartecki keys of the game.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me is to start fast. I think Nebraska's a more fluid offense. I think they're a more fluid group as a whole when they start out with a lead. You saw them get out to a 14-0 advantage against Michigan State. Where does that game end up if they don't get an opening drive touchdown? Where does that game end up if there's not a special teams touchdown? On the road, first true road game of the season, because Kansas City was basically a home game. You got to get out to a good start. The second one is make Malik Washington a little uncomfortable. He's still a freshman. I get he's a former 5-star, but he's still a freshman, and that sometimes some sort of immaturity can sometimes lead to bad things for a freshman quarterback. Get him frustrated early on and get him uncomfortable. And the last one, because Maryland thrives and loves the big play, control the time of possession. Establish the run game early. Take long drives. I want to see a 15-play, 80-yard drive at some point in the ball game for Nebraska. So those are my 3 this weekend. I still think on top of that, all of the ones that we've talked about in the past are very important. Protect Riola, score in the red zone, win the turnover battle. But I think game-specific, it's those 3.
Emmett Johnson, the Huskers running back, is 3rd in the league right now with rushing yards per game, and I think everybody would love to see a long, sustained drive, primarily running the football at College Park this weekend. Well, let's get to it. Predictions of the game.
Boy, that flips back and forth. I think you mentioned it being a sneaky game for Nebraska, and there's reasons to have cause for concern after last weekend, especially how the second quarter and the third quarter for the first part of the third quarter went. But I am going to take Nebraska. I think there's a drive late in the ball game that either puts the game away or Dylan Raiola drives down and wins the game for Nebraska. I'm going to go Huskers 28, Terps 24.
Okay. Well, the line right now is the point spread, Nebraska 6.5. Last week, Maryland lost to Washington. Washington put up 24 points on the Terps. I think we can do more than that. 31-21, Nebraska gets the win on the road. I'm just thinking this could be a coming out party for our offense, because everyone's talking about the high-flying Maryland offense. I think our offense kind of goes on the road with a little chip on their shoulder. Yeah, I like that.
Well, it's going to be. I think Maryland's going to be charged up. I mean, that was a tough way for them to lose the game against Washington in that fourth quarter. So I expect them to come out hungry. I expect them to come out fast, but we'll see. I think Nebraska's going to have everything they need to counter.
Jake, thank you for stopping by and sharing all that wonderful information with us. And thank you for joining us on another episode of Nebraska Football Now, here on News Channel Nebraska.